Hello, Julie here with J&B Living. I'm so glad you're here. I am doing something a little different on my channel today. As you can tell, no, I am not on oxygen. That might be the first thing that you think when you see me hooked up to this little contraption here. I am actually doing what is called hydrogen therapy. And I've been doing this for a few times now, and so I got to thinking that it might be something you might be interested in hearing a little bit more about, so I would like to share about it here with you today. So I'm real excited today that I am here with the co-founder of HolisTech, Chris Whitco, and he is going to explain a lot more about the hydrogen therapy, the science behind it, how it can benefit us, and that type of thing. So thank you so much, Chris, for sharing your time and your knowledge here with us today.
Well, I'm excited to be here. I love this technology. This is very exciting. So let me give you a little overview.
That's perfect. That's a great way to start.
Okay, a little hydrogen. So the benefits of hydrogen, actually the studies start off in like the 1700s when they kind of first discovered it could be therapeutic. But it wasn't until I think it was around 2001 where they noticed maybe the very first inklings that this could be therapeutic in the modern times.
Okay.
And it was its effect on antioxidants. And then of course, just like anything really radically new, it took time. And it took about 10 years for the first few studies to just kind of percolate and kind of get picked up. So around 10 years later, around 2011, which is not that long ago, it kind of started coming, institutes started doing research and study, and they started seeing, is this true? Hydrogen is starting to have therapeutic benefits. And so it took about another, say, 6 years. So it wasn't until 2017 when the studies kind of took another step. And so we started seeing a little bit more of the studies and the research. And so since about 2020, it's really kind of picking up steam, and I just did a Google search, and they're up to about 3,000 studies on molecular hydrogen. So that's about where we're at.
Many.
So it's still relatively new.
Sure.
And so generally, what is molecular hydrogen? How does it work? So, well, first of all, hydrogen is the first molecule or element on the periodic table. Are you familiar with the periodic table in chemistry?
I remember back in chemistry that I had a really, really hard time memorizing that periodic table. It was not one of my finer moments in my early education. I hated it. Hated chemistry.
Well, I think the takeaway is that, we are made up of molecules. Everything is a molecule. And hydrogen is one of the most it's the most predominant element in the universe. So there's a lot of hydrogen in our bodies. In fact, all the cells that make up human bodies, by volume, we're about 65% hydrogen.
Wow.
And about 20, I'm gonna screw up the numbers here, but it's about 20-25% oxygen, about 14% nitrogen, and about 2% everything else.
And is that way throughout like your whole entire life, or do you does it differ as you age?
These are the elements of your body.
Okay.
So everything that your body's made of, which is obviously human cells.
Right.
And these human cells are made of molecules. So if you think about what a protein is made of, they're all made of molecules. They're all made of elements. And so the elements make up everything. And hydrogen's it's the smallest element. It's the oldest element. And just from a kind of a safety standpoint, like your body knows what to do with hydrogen. And it's not like it's something where some people are gonna have maybe negative adverse reactions. This is a molecule that is universal. Okay. It's in all of us. So our body is very comfortable with hydrogen. It's like water, right? Can you have too much water? You can drink a lot of water.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of negative side effects.
Right.
Obviously, there is a condition, I forget what it's called, where you actually can get too much water, which just kind of dilutes all your the electrodes or whatever. Electrolytes, that's what I'm looking for. So you can have that, but really it's hard to get to that. You can drink just a lot of water and you're good. Same with hydrogen. You can have a lot of hydrogen. There's no such thing as like too much hydrogen. I mean, you can have
So
a lot
why
of
do we want to bring it in?
Well, that's
Why?
a really good question. She wants to get right to the chase. So we want to bring it in because, first of all, there's a lot of good reasons. Probably the biggest reason medically is its effect on free radicals.
Okay.
And we know that free radicals are a problem. They cause all kinds of issues. They cause inflammation. They cause all kinds of disease conditions. And you can do the study and say, wow, free radicals are bad. So there's a lot of things that reduce free radicals. Those are called antioxidants. So you heard of it?
So like the oxidant part of this or something seems to come to mind here.
Yeah. So when things oxidize, when you breathe, you're basically oxidizing because you're using oxygen. You're taking in the oxygen and you're using it.
Right.
That's oxidation.
Right.
When metal it oxidizes, it turns to rust.
Okay.
So that's what metal does as it oxidizes. Our body creates free radicals as it oxidizes. So we want to get rid of those free radicals. Now, when we are living, if you were to think of it as a completely holistic world, where we're only eating the foods that come from nature, and we're living in nature, kind of like humans probably did, 100,000 years ago. Very different environment. In fact, the way humans have evolved in this world is a very different scenario than the living conditions today. We're breathing all kinds of chemicals that are reacting in our bodies. We're not eating a diet that is kind of the traditional ideal diet that you would find in nature. We're having a lot of artificial substances. In fact, one of the biggest issues in our health today is the ultra-processed foods. And what hydrogen, this particular device, is doing, it's trying to balance the unbalanced lifestyle that we have. And hydrogen is one component. And so let's get into the details of exactly what hydrogen is doing. Now, all these studies, there's a lot of studies, 3,000, and they're across the spectrum of all kinds of disease. They're respiratory diseases, they're autoimmune diseases like Parkinson's and MS, there's cancer studies, there's
all on hydrogen.
All on hydrogen therapy.
Okay.
There are cardiovascular studies, there's sleep studies. I mean, it's just, there's 3,000 all across the board, and they're all having, they're being very cautious. They're not making any claims to say anything. And I think the reason is because hydrogen isn't a magic bullet. Hydrogen is something that we should be getting naturally. We're not getting as much anymore, and I'll go into that as to why in a second. Okay. But we're not getting as much hydrogen as we used to. And so there's these subtle, slow, degenerative effects because of the lack of hydrogen. So when you start bringing in hydrogen, it's also kind of a slow, subtle increase in capacity and capability and health and wellness.
Which is that maybe why when someone does hydrogen therapy treatments, it's not something that they're going to necessarily come out of one treatment and say, wow, this is, I can tell a night and day difference to how I feel.
Yes.
Because for me, it's been really, I've had a few of them now, but it's not something that I can tell these huge differences in the way I feel necessarily.
Right, and it obviously depends on how
bad I am.
It depends on where you're starting, right?
It's probably starting in a fairly good spot, so maybe I don't notice so much.
So, for example, you get a brand new car.
Yes.
And after the first time your oil needs to be changed, you change the oil.
Right.
You might not notice the difference.
Right.
But I tell you what, you have an old car, and you give it an oil change.
Right.
I have a car I'm driving. It's 30 years old. When I give that thing an oil change, I notice the difference right away. Okay. Why? Because it's old. It's not at the peak of its health, so to speak, in terms of a car. And so where you're starting from matters. So if you're really starting at a rough spot, you might see, like after one session, people have said, wow, I felt something after this session.
So you might wonder what it feels like to get a hydrogen therapy treatment. And as you can see, I've got this little plastic tube that's hooked up to the machine, and it loops around my ears and then comes up and has these two little air holes that go into your nose. And so the machine sends the hydrogen up in through the tube, and then it enters your body in through your nose and goes down into your lungs. And so that's one method of actually receiving the therapy. So what does it feel like? Well, it is a very, very slight sensation, almost like a tiny, tiny little tickle in the nose. So you have to really pay attention, but if you can tell that it's flowing, but it's like I said, it's a very slight sensation. So when you're talking with someone, you don't really even notice it, to be perfectly honest. What you saw when I started the video was I had the glasses on as well to get hydrogen in through the eyes, and honestly, I can't feel that at all. That's not something that, there's no sensation associated with that. And then the third way that I always am also getting my hydrogen while I'm here is pouring it into my water bottle. And so I'm drinking it as well. The taste of it, I mean, it honestly just tastes like water. I really can't tell any difference in the taste either. So all in all, a pretty painless and easy experience, if you will. I always, it's a 30-minute treatment, and so the time goes by pretty quickly. Usually I will sit here and relax, do a lot of deep breathing and some meditation, and it's a pretty enjoyable experience, honestly.
Yeah.
So let's get into some of the weeds here on what's really going on with hydrogen. I think the biggest idea that what's happening is why it's so effective in all diseases, and we try to get in this Western mind this approach of here's the disease, here's the solution, because that solution does that thing for that disease specifically.
Yeah. Put that Band-Aid on it.
Put that Band-Aid on that thing.
Yeah.
Whereas kind of the holistic approach is how can we support your own body's ability to make the right shifts so it knows what to do. It figures out where to put its energy and time. I like to think of it as biological, not bio-illogical. Right?
There you go.
It's like the biological functions know what to do.
Right. Which honestly is kind of like why I am doing these treatments. It's not like there is something specific that I felt like, oh, I need to like, I need to have this to cure this specific thing.
Yeah.
It's more for an overall wellness and a support of my whole, system, so to speak. It's just to support my wellness overall.
And that's a great philosophy. I like to ask people how much the average car payment, how much do you pay for your car payment every month? The average car payment in the United States right now is $700 a month, which is a lot.
Yeah.
And that's the average. And then you've got car insurance and you've got maintenance, things like that. And so I ask, well, how much are you spending a month on this vehicle? You're spending a lot of money on your car, maybe $700, $800 a month to keep that thing going. What are you paying on maintenance for this body? And so to your point, like when you can keep your own vehicle running optimally, you're better off in life. So anyway, getting back to all these health conditions, and in your case, just an overall consideration for your wellness. What's going on with hydrogen is, first of all, the anti-inflammation effect, talked about free radicals. So when you take a free radical, you're popping off an electron. Electrons have a charge, and now you've got this magnet, and kind of we know in a way that if you have a magnet, and remember in the old days we had like magnetic tape or VR that we would put in the VCR, and we knew if we hit a magnet it would mess it up, and that's because the magnetic field disrupts the constitution of that tape, and the same thing in our body. So this suddenly you've got this unnaturally charged particle going around, and it really raises havoc. It really goes through the body and just kind of bounces around and just disrupts blood cells, and it creates inflammation. It creates all this cascading effect.
Okay.
And so what's great about hydrogen is basically a proton and an electron. And so it really does a good job of like, hey, I'm an electron. And electrons like to kind of find their little home.
Okay.
And so you have one oxygen, and if you remember chemistry, they like to have 8, it's called, there's valence shells, and you like to have 8 in the outer shell. They love to have 8. All matter likes to have 8. Oxygen is 6, so it needs 2 more.
Okay.
H2O, 2 hydrogens, boom. Now I'm happy, I've got a nice stable molecule. So all molecules want 8. And so if you pop one off, it's like, oh, well, I'm missing an electron. Hydrogen's like, I'm just an electron.
So it pops in.
It pops in and
Interesting.
it neutralizes. Now what's
Okay.
cool about it is hydrogen's pretty robust, and so it'll only neutralize selective antioxidants. Why do we care?
Yeah.
Because certain antioxidants are important. The body uses antioxidants for certain things. So we don't want just a general antioxidant as much. I mean, they're still good, but what's even better are let's only neutralize the quote-unquote negative antioxidants, not the ones the body are using. The body uses antioxidants to communicate certain pathways. So it's really technically complicated, but in a nutshell, hydrogen is a selective antioxidant. I think that's the biggest one. The other huge deal about hydrogen is its effect on the mitochondria. So the mitochondria are the battery charging organelles that are inside every cell. So you have you have your body, which is an ecosystem of 67 trillion cells, but each cell has its own little ecosystem inside of it. It has a nucleus where the DNA is. It'll have all kinds of different stuff you remember from biology that it has. But one of the things that all your cells have are they look like little bacteria, and they actually are an ancient bacteria that all human cells, in fact, all animal cells, and in fact, all life cells, plants as well, have harnessed this symbiotic relationship with these bacteria that make batteries. Isn't that interesting?
That make batteries.
Yes.
What do you mean by they make batteries? Is they make the energy to make us go, essentially?
Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And so all the energy required for me to move the muscles, for me to convert light into information so I can see, to take what I'm hearing and turn it into stuff, and to actually, when I touch my hands and I can feel it in my mind, all the nervous system is using ATP. And ATP are these little batteries, and the body's making thousands, if not millions a second, all over the body.
What is required to make them?
Oh, very good question. So what's required to make first of all, you have 4 main inputs into the mitochondria. You have carbs, fats, and proteins, which not incidentally are exactly the macro foods that we think about what we need.
Right.
So those are the foods we require, so that on a macro level, so that on a micro level, those essential fatty acids, essential amino acids, or amino acids in general, those are the proteins. Fatty acids are from fat, and then glucose is from the carbs. And so they go into the mitochondria with oxygen. So that's the 4th thing.
And that's how the hydrogen has an impact on the mitochondria?
Well, what's interesting is the way the mitochondria charge up the batteries.
Okay.
And their method of doing that is very interesting. What's really happening is you're nourishing the body so that it can use the energy of the food to actually make energy. And the way it does that is it uses hydrogen. So what it does is think of how we make electricity in our house. What we do is we just plug it in and it works, right? But the electricity is coming from the electric plant. There's a plant making electricity. Sure. And what they do is they take coal and they burn it. And they create heat, and they'll boil water. And the water will create steam, and it'll spin a little fan on top. And when you spin a fan, it creates electricity. Okay. And they also do it without burning fuel in a dam. They'll dam up the river, so all the river has to go through a hole. And that hole, they'll put a turbine in it, and that turbine will spin and make electricity. Okay. It just makes electricity.
Okay.
And that's the natural way to do it, because you don't have to burn anything. You don't have to burn fossil fuels. The water's just coming in. Well, guess what the body does? The same thing. The mitochondria takes hydrogen, puts it into an inner membrane that just pushes hydrogen in all this inner membrane. So there's so much hydrogen in this inner membrane. It's like a dam. And then it actually has this little organelle. It's a little protein, and it's called ATP synthase. That's the name of the protein. And what it does is when the hydrogen pours through that protein, it spins. Yeah, it's fascinating. You can YouTube this. You can actually watch.
Interesting.
They made models of how this works. And it is fascinating.
And that's what produces
And
the
when-
energy in our
Yes,
body?
exactly. When that little organelle spins, just like a hydroelectric dam, nothing's burned. The hydrogen comes through and it spins that molecule. It's called the electron transport chain, and all this energy is made. And the moment we unplug that battery, if we were to tell all the mitochondria to stop working, it would be like, it would be like we pulled the plug out of, when you pull the plug out of something, basically the short answer is the hydrogen makes the mitochondria more optimized.
Okay.
So you're optimizing your ability to make these batteries. Now, what the battery does with this extra energy, the body knows what to do with it. But ultimately, what we know is that when your body has increased energy potential to be optimized, to be more, it wakes up the mitochondria, it gets them more effective, it makes more mitochondria. Mitochondrial health is important. That we used to have more hydrogen in our bodies. Do you know how? Do you know where this is pretty recent too. We found out that one of the main ways in which we created hydrogen was in our gut. And that when you feed the body fiber, insoluble fiber, when the body digests that fiber, those microbes create hydrogen. So our body in the past, I referred to at the beginning of this talk about the natural environment. When you're running around, this is before fire, before you could cook things. You couldn't eat beans. You couldn't, it was even hard to eat meat because you couldn't cook it.
Right.
So there was a lot of the primates are mostly vegetarian.
Right.
And so they're just eating, all fruit have fiber, all vegetables have fiber. There's a lot of fiber in a natural diet.
Right.
And so that fiber is feeding the gut bacteria. There's a lot of science these days about the gut biome and how it affects our hormones. And honestly, our hormones regulate everything.
Right.
So,
I'm finding that out.
Yeah, hormones
after I lost
regulate
mine.
Yeah, if you want to lose weight, it's all about hormones. You can starve yourself. You can exercise. And we know these people who are, I know people, I'm a pretty thin person, who eat less than me and work out more than me, and they weigh way more than me because their metabolism is controlled by their hormones. And the hormones are controlled by the gut biome. And the gut biome is what you eat. So when you're not eating, at least 50% of your diet on your plate is fiber, vegetables. You're not getting the fiber, at least minimal. So that's why, like, supplementing with hydrogen will just make sure that your body is getting the hydrogen necessary for optimal cellular function, for optimal mitochondrial function, for optimal antioxidant function, and who knows what else down the pike.
One of the other things that I was thinking that we could talk about, Chris, was like that there's different ways for us to receive the hydrogen into the body. So when we first started the video here today, you noticed that I had on goggles and I had on the little tubing, and then I've also been drinking the water as well.
Chris, how do we actually make hydrogen water?
So what we do is we have our little tank, and of course hydrogen is a very small molecule, so it'll go through the walls of plastic fairly easily. So we want a nice metal walled container, and you can look, we have these diffusers, and what this is kind of a porous, it's actually a stone that has little holes in it, and it's machined to go on this steel tube, and we put one in because we have two. I like to bring the other one, which is very similar, and on this side, and then we start the machine.
Welcome to use hydrogen generator. Please hydrogen production start.
And what will happen is it'll actually remove the hydrogen right from, we have distilled water in here. So now what it's doing is it's removing the hydrogen molecules. And you can see it's just going right into the water.
And we were showing how
Yep.
to get it into the body. So maybe you could talk a little bit about why we use some different techniques. Is any one of them any more optimal than another? Or?
That's a good question. I think the optimal way is a combination of the water
Mhm.
and the air. The air goes right into like when you had the goggles,
Mhm.
it's going directly into the eyes.
Okay.
You can do ears. You can do hydrogen enemas.
Really?
You fill an enema bag with hydrogen.
That's okay. We'll pass on that one.
We're not doing that here, but I mean these are different options.
Okay.
But the
So
hydrogen.
it's anyway, really.
Yeah, so the hydrogen water, it's got a half-life of about 2 hours. So it'll diffuse right out of that water. But when you drink it, the hydrogen kind of follows the pathway of the water. It'll get absorbed into the blood, it'll move through the
Okay.
bloodstream, and it'll diffuse slowly within those 2 hours out to all the cells in the body.
And the same way with when it's coming in through the respiratory system, it's diffusing in a different way.
It's
then.
diffusing in a different way. And so there are different ways to make hydrogen. I think the third other way is to basically take a hydrogen tablet.
Interesting.
But I'm not really sure about its efficacy because it depends a lot about what's going on in your gut and how fast it's released, and it's a lot less controlled. And
Mhm.
I don't recommend doing that. So I think the drinking the water and breathing it is the optimal way to do it. And I think most people would agree. A lot of the research is done either on hydrogen water or hydrogen air gas, breathing it. So those are the two main ways to do it. And I think those are the best ways to do it.
So we have people from all over the place that are followers of the channel here, and so if someone wanted to, if they're not living here in Louisville where you all are located, what advice would you have to them to get to see if there's a treatment available somewhere near them? Is it something that I believe you have a certification? Chris has a certification actually from the Molecular Hydrogen Institute
That's
to
right.
be able to offer this here. So what advice would you give to someone if they're like, oh, I'm really interested in trying this after listening to this discussion today?
That's a good question. I think obviously looking up and seeing if there's a place locally that offers this. There are places online you can get hydrogen tablets where you put the tablets in the water and it will create
releases it in the
hydrogen.
water,
You can do that. And honestly, from a holistic approach, eat more fiber.
That's a great.
Make your own
We
hydrogen.
talked about that, so I guess
Make
that's a
your
great-
own hydrogen.
Yeah.
To me, the more natural, the more ideal, the more we can get back to what the body knows and wants. And I believe the body wants kind of a more holistic, natural, in harmony with the earth, in harmony with the universe, in harmony with God. However you want to look at it, it's if it didn't exist 150 years ago, it's probably not something you want to put into your body. That's a general. If it comes from the earth, it's probably good. This is a general rule of thumb. If it comes from a machine bolted to a factory floor somewhere and has a weird sciencey name, it's probably not good.
Well, I really appreciate you once again taking the time to share your knowledge about this here today, and I look forward to having some discussions on some of the other therapies
Yeah, me
that
too,
you all
Julie.
offer here in the future.
Love talking with you. Thank you.
Thank you.